Our guest today is the one and only director of the SEC's Division of Corporation Finance, Erik Gerding. Erik joined the staff just 2 years ago in mid-2021, serving as a deputy director until assuming the role as the director at the beginning of this current year. And he has taken the job running, coming in at a time of an unprecedented spate of rulemaking, really breathtaking. Erik's background includes 2 stints teaching law, most recently at the University of Colorado, one of my favorite states. And like most of us, he's done his time in law firm life. And so he's all too familiar with what we do on a daily basis. If you haven't heard Erik speak before, he's got a wry sense of humor. You are in for a treat, something you don't always get from a regulator. I really dig the guy. Today on realtransparentdisclosure.com. And now we're going to do the famous disclaimer.
The views I express today are provided in my official capacity as the Commission's Director of the Division of Corporation Finance and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Commission, the Commissioners, or any members of the staff.
Hi, I'm Brock Romanek, and as I mentioned in my introduction, I couldn't be more thrilled to have Erik Gerding with me, the Division Director of the Division of Corporation Finance. And Erik, we're going to dig right into it, and that is hiring. It's amazing to me the amount of hiring that Corp Fin and maybe the entire SEC is doing. But I remember back in 2010, then SEC Chair Mary Shapiro announced that the SEC was hiring 374 professionals, with perhaps a total of 800 new ones coming in over a longer period of time. But that did not happen for mostly political reasons. But I feel like this time is different. I know an accountant friend who's actually just participated in a forum that was conducted by Corp Fin about if you want to get hired here, how to do it. And he said it was an unbelievable session. So the kinds of things that you are doing to recruit seem amazing. And I know you're also hiring folks at all different kind of levels. I know you recently brought back Melissa Campbell-Duru to serve as deputy director. Sebastian Gomez also recently returned to Corp Fin as associate director of the disclosure review program. And having served twice at the SEC in Corp Fin, I know what a great place it is to work. And I do have a video entitled 5 Sweet Things about working at the SEC. So can you tell us a little bit about, how many people you're hiring or what the process is?
Sure. Well, first, let me thank you, Brock. I've been reading your column off and on for a long time. So it is great to actually be with you in person or remotely. Thank you also for plugging working at the Commission. It is an incredible honor, as you know, to work at the Commission and just an amazing group of public servants here. We are looking to hire about 60 people this year. That would bring the total staff of Corp Fin up to 470, which is still under the number that the division had in 2016. But it is incredibly important that we get reinforcements. We get talented people, talented accountants and lawyers into the division. And to really help us with our critical mission. And I think, Brock, you've heard me speak on the conference circuit. This is part of my standard talking points. My standard response is to really drum up interest and get the word out that this is a great, fantastic place to work. It is where the best and brightest minds, both lawyers and accountants, come to work. So thank you. And I appreciate being able to get the word out.
Yeah, I mean, I'd add a few points. One, and being an alumni of the SEC staff is an incredible experience. Once you've worked there, I think you find the rest of your career, whenever you do meet someone who's worked there, even though you might not have worked there at the same time, you share a similar bond. When you're working there, you feel like you have a purpose in your job. A lot of times, as you know, working in a law firm, you might not quite feel purpose. I think working at the SEC, you definitely feel that purpose. In terms of the process of if someone listening to this is interested in joining, you go, it's, as I understand it, to the SEC's website. You find the spot where it's like the government hiring, and it explains the process where you submit a resume and go from there. Any other tips of, particular types of folks you're looking for or levels of experience, or is it really sort of a hodgepodge?
So I think the other thing I would tell your viewers, Brock, is to go to the Corp Fin division page, and we do have a particular page with just our postings on there. One thing that differentiates us from some of the other divisions, enforcement, is that we do hire at all levels, including folks straight out of accounting programs and straight out of law schools. We tend to hire on the very junior entry level more lawyers. Accountants tend to have more experience when we hire. But the overall point is that we do hire folks at various levels of experience, from straight out of law school all the way to bringing alumni back. Uh, Brock, you're an alumnus, so if I can take you out to coffee and convince you to come back, let me know.
Third time's a
Um,
charm.
we also, you mentioned bringing Sebastian back to the division. Duck Gang came back to the division recently as a senior officer in our disclosure review program. And Barb Jacobs has also joined the disclosure review program leadership. So between Melissa, Duck, and Sebastian, we do welcome alumni back. And it is part of making sure, again, that we have the best and brightest for our core mission.
And I'll mention, as someone who worked for a commissioner, I did get pretty good insight. And actually, I was the enforcement liaison to enforcement back when Corp Fin only had one person in that role. And so I got a pretty good feel for all the very different offices and divisions when I worked there. Some offices and divisions have been created newly since I've been there, but I am biased, but Corp Fin to me definitely is the best one. And particularly if you ever decide to leave the government, I think that's more realistically the kind of job, the kind of background where you can get steady work. But everyone's their own person. So let's move on to the next topic. Here's something that people might not realize: that sure, you're presiding right now over what I consider an unprecedented spate of rulemaking, but you're also managing hundreds of people. Some of those people are working remotely, part-time, and maybe even full-time. What is the current state of the staff working in person versus remotely right now?
So we do have a collective bargaining agreement with the unionized members. Under the collective bargaining agreement, the disclosure operations staff can work fully remote. The remainder of the division and all managers can work remotely the majority of the time, but they do have to be report to their duty station twice in any 2-week pay period. So we are working hard with this hybrid environment. We face a lot of challenges that many um, institutions and in the private and public sector do, of trying to create community or reinforce community in a hybrid environment. But it is, I think, working fairly well. We are very, very efficient in our work in this environment, and we are working hard to reinforce that sense of shared purpose that you mentioned a few minutes ago, Brock.
Yeah, I know a number of people there that still work on the staff. Some are remote a lot, some are a little, and it really, I am hearing good things about the sense of community that you are building, and that is so important right now, because it's been 3 or 4 years now since the pandemic, and it's easy to kind of get lost on your own if you're working remotely all the time. All right, so knowing that you have some constraints, as you need to follow the agenda of Chair Gensler and also be attuned to the demands of the congressional committees that oversee the SEC and all the other stakeholders that have an interest in what the SEC does, what do you consider your philosophy in overseeing Corp Fin now that you've been the director for over 6 months?
So it's really two things that I'm focusing on, Brock, and apologies for having kind of a catchphrase, but the first one is really focusing on our people. And you and I have just mentioned how we are trying to strengthen our community. Strengthening our community and focusing on our people really has a couple of different components. First is the hiring that you mentioned. So we really need to build a bench. We need to recruit the next generation of public servants in the division. And that means casting a very wide net in getting talent. So that's part of why you hear me do the salesman routine, Brock, when I'm going out. Like I take this very seriously that we have to cast a wide net. We have to look for places in which we've never recruited before in order to make sure that we are getting, again, the best and brightest in the division. We also have to invest a lot in the staff that we do have. We have to help them build substantive knowledge and skill sets. And we have to show the folks in the division how what they're doing today and over the next year fits into like a longer career arc at the commission. We have to continue to promote mentoring within the division. And we have to keep emphasizing collaboration within the different units of the division. So there's 470 folks, or there will be after our hiring is done. And we have to work hard to make sure that all of our units are working together to really fulfill our statutory mandate. We also have to focus on our purpose. It's investor protection, it's promoting capital formation, it's fair and orderly markets. And one of the things that I think folks in the division have heard me say over and over again in our internal meetings is how do we be proactive? How do we think about emerging disclosure issues? And second, in order to be proactive and think about emerging issues, how do we better connect to the public? How do we explain what we are doing? How do we listen to the needs of investors and issuers? And part of that is finding a way to reach out to all voices, not just those who know how to contact us, not just those that are the loudest and most sophisticated, but voices all around the country, including voices that don't typically reach out to the division. So people and purpose is the catchwords, Brock.
Yeah, and I have to say, having now observed over 35 years of Corp Fin, I mean, you came into this job and then became director, and what you've accomplished in such a short period of time is really commendable. And I don't think people realize how challenging a job that you have. And so hats off to you. So let's talk
I
about
should know it's made a lot easier, Brock, by having good staff, right? So like I'm the pretty face that comes and takes all the credit, right? But like it's really the staff doing behind the scenes work that should get a lot of, or not a lot, like practically all 99.9% of the credit, Brock. So
Yeah, I mean, we talked about career arc, and earlier I talked about people getting a background in Corp Fin to potentially parachute out. But like I said, I still know a lot of people there, and I last left in 1998. So that shows you that a lot of people that do go work at the SEC stay at the SEC, and they stay there for a reason. There's a good life balance. Again, there's a sense of purpose in the work that you do, and the people are just so nice. It really is a great place, and people come to work from the SEC from all over the country. That was one of the beauties, I think, when I started there, my first time right out of law school, was people were coming from all different states, all different schools. The staff back then really made an effort. And back then, really, any new staffers that came in right out of law school. It was very actually rare to have a lateral unless they slotted in at the director level. So it was more like classes in August and September as your third year of law school ended. But now it's that has really changed, and it would be exciting time to be working there, I think, because you have people coming in laterally that have a lot of real life experience. They're able to mentor and train someone that if they were new. So let's talk about the rulemaking process because those of us on the outside, that's what we have to live with, including the role of comments. It's the internet's changed
You
so
don't have
much.
to just live with it. It helps us, Brock,
Yeah.
right? It's not something to be endured. It is something that is our common mission, right? I think people inside the building and people in the private sector, we're all trying to make sure our capital markets are working. So
Well,
sorry to learn.
I think sometimes I'm still living in the paper world where like a rulemaking would get 5 comment letters because it wasn't as easy as pushing a button. Because now when you put out a proposal, not only does the proposal have to comply with many additional laws than what used to exist 30 years ago, but the number of sheer comments that you have to review is really breathtaking. So what would you say generally about, we have so many important rulemakings. Obviously, you just adopted the cyber disclosure one, which is hugely important, but you have the climate one potentially coming up soon. What do you view the rulemaking process like, and what is the role of the comment process?
So you're right, Brock. We do have a very full agenda. In the last several months alone, the Commission voted to adopt the cybersecurity disclosure release that you mentioned, as well as the share repurchase disclosure release. Um, it's a full agenda for a reason. Markets are continuing to evolve, and there's new risks to companies and new risks to investors. And we're trying to provide investors with the information that really helps them make good decisions. So you'll hear a lot of refrains in our releases. It's really about providing consistent, comparable, and decision useful investor information to investors. Um, we take the notice and comment process very, very seriously, Brock. So you mentioned it is a lot of work. You mentioned that the comment files are getting longer, which takes more time and more care to read. But reading and analyzing each comment, like not only satisfies our legal obligation under the Administrative Procedures Act, it also makes for better public policy. And I know that sounds a little corny, but like we take the feedback that we get in the comments very, very seriously, not just because of our legal obligations, but because it helps inform the staff and ultimately the commission as we're trying to chart courses forward in terms of what disclosures investors would help investors and would solve our satisfy our statutory mandate. Um, I personally did not realize when I took the job how much time I would spend listening to outside groups. So we are very serious about our open door policy at the division, and we strongly encourage the public to engage with us on rulemakings. And we're also, as I mentioned earlier, trying to proactively reach out and get around the country, get the word out on what we're doing, and make sure that we're listening to a wide range of voices from around the country. Again, not just the loudest and most sophisticated folks.
And then the topic that really impacts our viewers here the most is the disclosure review process. What does that look like these days?
So, in terms of volume, uh, because of the SPAC and IPO surges in recent years, we do have a large number of new public companies. And that means an increased number of periodic filings that we have to review each year. In terms of organization, last year, under my friend and predecessor, Renee Jones, we did create 2 new industry offices, the Office of Crypto Assets and the Office of Industrial Applications and Services. So those new offices and our new team of senior officers in the disclosure review program, so Sebastian, Guth, and Barb, who are joining Jessica Kane and Cicely Lamoth. They're like in charge of continuing to develop specialized industry expertise to help us keep up with dynamic and evolving markets. Um, I've mentioned that we're also paying a lot of attention to focusing on emerging disclosure issues and communicating to the public. So in the past year, we've issued a number of Dear Issuer letters and disclosure guidance on topics such as China-related matters, which builds on guidance we've issued in the past several years, disruptions in crypto markets, the China and Ukraine, the Russia-Ukraine conflict. So we're trying to really work with issuers to help them understand how emerging issues would impact their obligations under existing laws and rules. All of this is, I hope, helpful. All of these communications, what we often call one-to-many communications, are really designed to provide more clarity and more help to investors in understanding how our disclosure regime works, and more guidance and help to issuers as well. We're going to keep doing this sort of work, Brock, like analyzing emerging issues, thinking about what disclosures might be required under existing rules, and communicating with the public. Disclosure operations is going to be very, very busy as we handle new disclosure comments or new disclosure requirements from new rules. As the Commission votes to adopt rules, we welcome questions from issuers and their advisors on new requirements. We're going to work very hard to communicate our answers and our views to the public. And let me provide sort of an example of sort of how this works. So we had the pay versus performance rules go into effect this year. As I said in the speaking circuit around the country, we are not looking to play gotcha with comments on the first year that new rules go into effect. So if issuers are looking to comply with good faith with our rules, we welcome that. Please come talk to us with questions. We view this as a collaborative process. And ultimately, the front line of protecting investors and providing to disclosures is not us. It's the issuers and the advisors. It's issuers and advisors who are drafting disclosures and making sure that investors are well informed. And that's the front line in protecting investors and capital formation.
Great stuff. It sounds like a fair and reasonable approach. And hats off to you, seriously, Erik. The people that I know working there really enjoy working for you. I think morale is pretty high right now, and it's not always. It always depends on who's the director, just like at any company, who's up at the top, about how people feel about their jobs. So congrats to you on that, and you're off to a great start. And maybe you'll be in this job for 20 years. You don't know.
I did see, Brock, I looked at like one of your blog posts from the past, and I looked at like who held the record, right, for Corp Fin director, and it was the very first one, Mr. Bain, I think,
Right.
who you tell me, it was like 23 years.
Baldwin Bain. Yeah, but that's probably back when there were 5 people on the staff, and the commissioners themselves actually used to review registration statements and take them effective. Well, I guess you didn't take them effective because you didn't have the delegation, but believe it or not, back in the early 30s, when the SEC was formed in 34, the commissioners themselves would review a registration statement. It's hard to believe. At least you don't have to do that.
No, like we're past that, but who knows? Like I joke with staff, I might try to break the record.
That would be awesome. That would be awesome. Thanks so much again. Have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you, Brock.